Okay, welcome to Into the Channel, a podcast primarily about women's football. Before we hit the pitch, if you enjoy the show or love women's football as much as your boys do, rock with us. Subscribe or follow YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you like to watch or listen. Comments, ratings, reviews, always appreciated. At ITC_pod on X, at Into the Channel pod on Threads. I am your host, Dino De Cespedes, and as always, I am joined by my co-host, Mr. Grant Engel. What is up, man?
I'm feeling fantastic, buddy. That was a pretty good weekend of football we just lived through. And it turns out, I was checking the calendar, it's not going to stop anytime soon.
Football never stops, man. This is why we're here.
It's true.
Massive week for international football on this side of the world, especially. CONCACAF Gold Cup quarterfinals in the books. We're going to recap all four big-time matchups: Canada, Costa Rica, Brazil, Argentina, Mexico, Paraguay, and the USA's big one against Colombia. Mr. Grant Engel, where do you want to get started?
You know, I always say this podcast is a journalistic enterprise, and something tells me that the news machine can only be pointing us in one direction here. So Let's talk about the United States of America versus Colombia.
Let's go. So last week I mentioned, pejoratively of course, that the U.S. were out here playing like this was the late 2000s. Well, Sunday night against Colombia, U.S. landed 3 first-half haymakers like this was the late 2000s. Let's fucking go. The U.S. pressed hard, pressed early, and in the 12th minute, Alex Morgan turned a 0.0 XG opportunity into a penalty for the U.S. I think the cynical view on that sequence was that Morgan kind of sniped one. Nothing wrong with being smart, opportunistic, but it wasn't quite like the smash and grab kind of first goal that some segment of USWNT fan might be looking for, especially coming off that 2-0 loss to Mexico. Combine that with the fact that Colombia actually looked like the more dangerous side through the first 10 minutes. So to be fair, at this point, I'm excited, but I still have my guard up. Now, the hopeful USWNT fan that lives deep, deep inside me saw that sequence and was just like, wow, no galloping white horse, not like a regal, highlight type play, just some real gritty. And from all people, Alex fucking Morgan making it happen. I've kind of lamented there's Alex Morgan and there's everyone else approach that I think has really hurt the U.S., especially in the World Cup. But to see her make something out of nothing in this one under sort of nervy circumstances, you have to love to see that. So that play starts with Morgan's dead sprint at Lorena Durango, 40 yards away from goal. That pressure forces Durango into a back pass to Daniela Arias, which never actually reaches Arias. Morgan pokes it away. And where most players would just be happy to dispossess in that moment and maybe just kind of corral the ball, especially being in a dead sprint toward the goal, Alex's poke away doubles as a perfect pass to Lindsey Horan to start an absolutely lethal, lightning quick give and go. Horan knows what time it is. Perfect return pass back to Morgan, who earns the penalty. Horan immediately converts, 1-0 lead for the U.S. Hot start for the Americans that I thought released some real tension. Where were you expecting the match to go from here?
Well, great call on the give and go and just the overall chemistry between Horan and Morgan on that play. I feel like we've been told we put these experienced players on the field because of their chemistry, because of their experience. That's the kind of stuff you want to see from them that we haven't seen in other matches and over the last few months, really. So that's supposed to be born out of having those experienced players on there. But I'll be honest with you, what I was thinking in that moment was okay, great, good, hot start. We talk about in this pod a lot. That does feel like it relieves pressure for a side that has a lot of pressure on it to get an early goal. But I just thought that Colombia was still going to grow into the game and keep it close. At the very least, keep it, 1-0 in the first half, if not get an equalizer. We talked a lot about the smarts and the amazing athleticism from the Colombia side. But wouldn't you know it, my feelings in that moment, not correct. I know, it's rare. Doesn't happen a lot. It turned out I was a little wrong about them growing into the game.
Yeah, so let's talk about Colombia a little bit here. Obviously, we know what they're capable of at their best. And we got some exciting early moments. Seeing Caicedo go at Fox, seeing Caicedo and Germa face to face, it was some real pay-per-view type shit. That was exciting. This match against the U.S., though, clearly not at the level that we might have been afraid of coming into this one. What stuck out to you about Colombia's approach?
In a few words, I fucking hated it. I didn't like their game plan, and I didn't hate it from my U.S. fandom side. I think anybody who's a U.S. fan probably appreciated and liked their game plan. It looked to me like Colombia was really committed to, we are playing out from the back line. And people talk about that like it's modern football, and it is. You want a goalkeeper who has great foot skills, who's able to kind of play the ball out and then go from your fullbacks. But their fullbacks were not coping well at all when Jaden Shaw, Alex Morgan, Trinity Rodman, and Lindsey Horan were pressing them. I thought Colombia's best moments were winning the ball in the midfield and trying to run and gun down the flanks, hit the ball over the top to Caicedo, Usme, and Pavi. But they just didn't do a lot of that, it felt like. It felt like they were like, we're not playing underdog football because we're not underdogs. I think that's a dangerous mindset to get in when you're playing a team that might have maybe not the best player on the field, like we talked about last week. The best player on the field may have well been Linda Caicedo. But if you don't have as many excellent players as the other team, maybe you just kind of resign yourself to, we're going to play the toughest kind of underdog football we can.
Yeah, I definitely do not disagree with you at all on their approach. And it was funny to watch them kind of play out the back. Like their keeper is kicking it to like a left back or right back, and then they're the ones just kicking it upfield. Like it's just like, what was the point of that? Like, you just took all of that extra risk, 1-2 passes, and then like somebody else is just kicking it past the halfway line. Didn't make a ton of sense to me. Colombia's strategy, playing out from the back, not sure we were too into that. The U.S.'s back line, new look in this one. What'd you see from the U.S.'s defense?
Well, that I very much liked. And we talked about it before. You know, I jokingly said that I had got something wrong. Obviously, it's a rare case. This one, rewind the tape. I wanted Germa. I wanted Tierna Davidson in that back line. Classic sports radio thing. I'm going to separate my shoulder, patting myself on the back because I got a sports thing right.
Check the tapes.
Check the tapes. But aside from the press, you got to give credit to Germa and Davidson as the two center halves. Mm-hmm. It felt like they made a massive difference in defense. They were stopping the attackers on defense, but they were helping get the attack started.
Yeah, 100%. Great call, Germa and Davidson. But I did want to zoom in a little bit to Alyssa Nair. She had a couple unbelievable saves in the first half, especially when you consider, well, first, incredible skill on both, but you add in the stakes at that moment of the match, the year she's had since the World Cup. We were talking about it before the show. She allowed 50 goals for the Red Stars last year, and that was after a World Cup ending. And not saying this was her fault in any way, shape, or form, but the U.S.'s World Cup ends, and she's the last U.S. player to touch the ball. That shit just sticks with you. We also joked about her kind of like spazzing out last week, chasing a zero stakes ball out of bounds for no apparent reason. So she's had herself a year, but holy fuck, to come back with those two huge saves, plus like the posture, like the stature, the death stares. It looked like she was like 10 feet tall after those two saves. I'm glad you brought up Naomi Girma too. I continue to believe that she's probably the US's most valuable player just because when she's not out there, suffice it to say, somewhat of a drop-off. Girma gets things started on the US's second goal. Free kick, 55 yards out. She puts an absolute fucking dime right onto the head of Alex Morgan. Germa's like, hey, Alex, left eyebrow, right eyebrow, where do you want it? You just let me know. Perfectly placed little header down from Morgan into the path of Jenna Neiswanger, who blasted in. Perfectly executed set piece. All this after we've done our fair share of questioning if the U.S. had the technical chops to not only win this thing, but climb up to the absolute apex globally. Incredible bit of craft and skill and touch from three different players to put the U.S. up 2. Now we're cooking a little bit. Where's your head at this point?
Yeah, so I mean, we've talked about Jenna Neiswanger a few times on this pod. NWSL Rookie of the Year, stalwart for the NWSL champion, Gotham FC. She was excellent. The touch was perfect, running in off the Morgan header. I thought Neiswanger did a lot of great things defensively. She was like shading attacking players into inopportune areas, forcing the ball out of bounds, and just working on a string with Davidson and Emily Fox on the other end. It was like they were keeping their shape and just getting Colombia into areas that you knew they didn't want to be in. I didn't know that tactically, like walking in, but you could tell from where Colombia was on the pitch, they didn't really have anywhere to go a lot of times. So let me get this out of the way, actually. Speaking of our journalistic credibility here, I do need to cite that I misunderstood the yellow card rule the last time we spoke about it on this podcast. So I thought the yellow cards were reset between the group stage and the quarterfinals, but they're actually wiped after the quarterfinals. So I have to give even more credit to Jaden Shaw. She stayed out of the ref's book in this one. In a chippy game, we could not afford to lose her. You know, when we think about this being a chippy game, Morgan, Horan, and Rodman brought some much needed attitude to the side. Each of them picked up their first yellow in this match, but they did just enough to keep things under control. I will say Rodman scared the shit out of me at one point in the first half. After she picked up that yellow, she came in on a really late tackle at the end of the first half. I basically covered my face. It was like, oh no, like I thought it was. I thought she was for sure going to get their second yellow and get taken off the field with a red. But at that point, the ref had apparently decided she was not going to call really anything for at least an extended period of the match. And so Rodman got away with it, and we kind of got away with it. But I think it was fair because at least she wasn't calling it on Colombia either.
Yeah, I did want to call out, again, Alex Morgan, who I thought had an incredible showing in this one.
Yeah.
Because all three of those players were playing aggressive, playing chippy, but I thought Rodman maybe kind of lost her cool a little bit. She was running very, very hot. Yeah. But Morgan, obviously we talked about the play she makes at the 12 or 13 minute mark. She turns that aggression into actual on-field outcomes, right? On-field results. And I think that's something that, if you're a Trinity Rodman, I think that's like the next level to kind of hit. It's like, all right, I'm pissed. This is a chippy one. I'm not just going to earn myself a bullshit yellow by running you over. I'm going to use this aggression to actually create for the team. Even still, though, I think Rodman was able to cool herself down and crank up just how much she was able to impact the match positively, which I thought was a really great sign in the same match. So right before halftime, Rodman obviously has the great run wide after another Colombia turnover. Emily Fox finds her up the right side. Rodman runs down the ball, then perfect placement on her one-touch pass to Jaden Shaw. 3-0, first half stoppage time. What a way to end the first half. What a crusher if you're Colombia. That one didn't quite end the game, but I think more importantly, it evaporated any bit of tension, pressure that any of those U.S. players might have been feeling coming into this match. That just hit the release valve with that third goal right before halftime, and not the way you want to be going in if you're Colombia.
It felt like a backbreaker. And you're totally right. I mean, Rodman's pass on that play, I was freaking out on my couch, not really screaming and yelling or anything, but I was in love with the skill and the placement and the smarts of that pass. You see all the time when you have a winger going down the flank like that, and they play a cross in, and you have your number 9, or in this case, your number 10, they're running into the center of the box. And if the pass is just a little too far toward the end line, now the center back is going to be able to get in between that attacker and the ball and clear it out, or the goalkeeper is going to come out for a punch.
Yep.
The chemistry there between Rodman and Shaw, because Shaw slows up her run a little bit as she's coming in on that. And Rodman knows if I just leave it a little back, that defender is not going to be able to get there, and Shaw just blasted in. And it's just you cannot overstate the combination of genius and physical skill for Rodman to deliver the pass, take a little off the pass to make sure it gets there. It's like watching a beautiful curveball in baseball where it's just okay, that is executed absolutely to perfection.
My mind went to the Mahomes back shoulder.
There we go. Yeah.
That one reminded me a lot of a Mahomes special.
Yep.
I think it also can't be overstated. We had kind of gotten on the U.S. case for maybe being too super direct. Mm-hmm. I think it was funny. I think it was in the third match against Mexico. I think the color commentator was like, the U.S. got to be even more direct. I think Crystal Dunn played one back pass. She's like, why is she playing a back pass? Everything's going to be forward. And I was just like, holy shit. Are we not watching how this is going? This is going terribly. I thought it was really telling that the first goal, Alex Morgan, something out of nothing. The second goal, Germa, 55-yard free kick, a little misdirection, nice swanger, kind of coming around the left. Nobody sees her coming, and perfectly executed. And then this third one, Fox to Rodman wide, back into Shaw. And neither of these were the U.S. special, just put your head down and run straight at the goal.
Yep.
Hope that when you get there, there's an opening and you can just crank one. I'm pretty optimistic about this maybe being a turning the corner kind of moment where it might just click at this point. You're okay, not saying that we're going to win every match from here on out, but now we have a recipe. Now where it's okay, the game, the strategy is evolving a little bit to kind of match what's needed in a tournament like this.
I think that's a great point. So I think a part of that, we found different ways to score. We weren't trying to go to the well for the same thing every single time. And I think we should give some credit to Twyla Kilgore, who was getting a little bit of flack on social media after the last match. I really like the subs that she chose. So it was Midge Purse for Rodman to open the second half. I'm never happy to watch Trinity Rodman leave the field. I like watching her play football as much as any USA player probably in my lifetime. But when she made that questionable challenge near the end of the first half, I was like, oh, don't bring her back out for halftime. Don't get a second yellow.
Yeah.
And Twyla listened. So he brought on Midge Purse for Rodman. So perfect sub there, I thought. Lavelle comes on for Jaden Shaw at 56 to protect Jaden Shaw from that other yellow. Sophia Smith comes on for Alex Morgan in the 72nd. Olivia Moultrie comes on for Corbin Albert in the 72nd. And then Emily Sana comes on for Haran at 84. Use of all 5 subs, all pretty much like for like in these substitutions. You kind of keep that chemistry. You keep the shape that you've been kicking ass with. And all 5 of those players, I know like we have, a little U.S. focus here. All 5 of those players are really good players who can play those positions that you put them in.
Yep.
So overall, I think it was really excellent for the USA. I do want to say, I think Colombia could have played better.
Yep.
We didn't like their plan, but I didn't feel like they were totally on. I don't know. I mean, this is a team that made the quarters of the World Cup.
Quarterfinals. Yep.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's hard to say like, oh, that this moment was too big for them, but they were a little focused on the shithousery. I mean, the antics before the penalty kick.
Yeah.
I can't remember which player like ran out. I don't usually call for yellow cards, but I was like, isn't that a yellow card? Like, I wasn't like irate about it, but I was like, I feel like that should be a yellow card when like you're lining up to take a PK and somebody just runs into the box. But yeah, it just felt like Colombia, I don't know, they weren't super up for it, and we hated their plan. And so, like you said, like maybe you don't take a ton from this, but this is definitely a sizable step in the right direction for USA.
I wonder if Colombia maybe got too fixated on the Mexico tape where they saw, okay, Mexico's getting really physical, and maybe tried to recreate that. Only issue was I think the offensive attack was a little different in this one. Different lineups as well. Colombia, obviously, without Mayra Ramirez, that's going to be tough. If you imagine Caicedo and Ramirez up top, different kind of ball game. Like I think it was a kind of hold your breath type moment every time Caicedo has got a little bit of space in front of her. So if you picture Mayra Ramirez there on the other side, it makes it more interesting. I think this game just got away from them. To be honest, I think they kind of got caught off guard. Alyssa Nair also, she changed the game, especially with that second save. I mean, that was unbelievable. Wrist game 99 from Alyssa Nair.
Huge. Yeah.
I think that really has to kind of sink you a little bit when you're like, gosh, we had a chance. I thought Pavi too for Colombia didn't have the best performance that she's had in this tournament.
Right.
They made it a little tough on her. Didn't quite have a lot of space when she did. The accuracy, I don't think, was there. The precision wasn't there from her. So not Colombia's best performance. I think the U.S. deserves a lot of credit for that. Really great bounce back win for the U.S. And on to the semis from here.
Yeah, I think you got a lot to hang your hat on if you're USA. I'm glad you mentioned Pavi. In an excellent game-recognized game moment, when they showed the huddle, the U.S. women's national team huddle after the match, Rose Lavelle was wearing Pavi's jersey. So they had switched shirts. And I'm very interested to know, because I like that duo, because it's just like, was Pavi, Pavi's a relatively young player. So was she like 20 years old or 19 years old watching the 2019 World Cup? 2019 Rose Lavelle World Cup was a supernova player. And so like, was Pavi watching her? Like, yeah, that's who I want to play. Like, or has Rose watched Pavi and be like, I like that player, I'm going to go get her shirt. I'd be very interested to know that.
Game recognized game. That's a perfect descriptor of it. Maybe Rose sees a little bit of herself in Pavi's game.
Yeah.
But yeah, it won't be the last time we hear from this Colombia team. They'll be back in the Olympics. Hopefully we get to see their full roster this summer. Let's go ahead, though. The next quarterfinals matchup featured Brazil and Argentina. What do we need to know about this one?
Brazil 5, Argentina 1. Didn't look like it was necessarily going to go that way early, but that's where it went. I mean, it's Brazil, Argentina. We got to think Lakers versus Celtics, Yankees versus Red Sox, Cowboys versus 49ers, UEFA versus people who sing mean chants and hurt their feelings. We'll get into that later. But who doesn't like a good rivalry?
Real quick on the rivalry.
Yeah.
USA-Colombia.
Pretty good.
That one's got some mustard on it.
Certainly.
Who is the USA's top rival? I did a little Googling and it came back Japan, and that just didn't feel right. USA Mexico didn't look like that.
No.
There was some nastiness in that Colombia matchup.
It might have been the 2015 World Cup. I think some people were referencing this, but I think Lady Andrade from Colombia tried to punch Abby Wambach in the 2015 World Cup. So
That'll
I
do it.
think there is some extended bad blood between those sides. Yeah, I mean, the USA, they've just been trampling teams for a long time. I was going to say maybe USA France, faced each other in World Cup. USA Netherlands, there was some
Ooh, that's a
chippiness.
good one. I like that.
They faced each other in a final. So as far as like on this side of the world, I would think it probably is Colombia.
I like it.
So back to this rivalry. I think these two countries, they care about football. I've read some stuff on the internet.
Checks out.
So this is, all jokes aside, this is one of the most historic and rabid rivalry matches available to us in international football. But instead of a fiercely competitive slugfest, we saw Argentina compete in some spots, but Brazil largely outclassed their neighbors to the southwest. Argentina had a golden opportunity when Dalila Ippolito collected an errant back pass from Brazil with the keeper way out of the box. Ippolito had what would be considered maybe like an easy-ish chip because the keeper was so far out.
Yep.
She was about 40 yards out, and she pushed it just to the left. That was probably too early to be like a bad omen for Argentina,
Yeah.
but shit started to get a little hectic for them pretty quickly. In the 19th minute, Levante right back and right midfielder Antonia, she hits a cross all the way across the pitch to Beatriz Zanerato, who has the opportunity to really just kind of wait for it and get it exactly where she wants, comfortably onto her, I believe it was her left foot. The defender doesn't close her down. She hits a little cross over to Yaya, who's right in the middle, and hits a perfect glancing header past the keeper. 1-0 Brazil, 20 minutes in. Where were you at this point?
Well, love the finish by Yaya. That was pretty awesome.
Very nice.
Zanerato, like you mentioned, great cross. I thought Argentina hung tough first 15 minutes, obviously scoreless up to that point. But I agree with you. You can kind of see the cracks starting to show a bit with Argentina having trouble keeping possession. And just sort of clearing was an issue for them.
Yes.
Couldn't quite give themselves a chance to breathe, which definitely ended up catching up with them as the match progressed. I want to rewind a little bit. On that Ippolito chip, I wasn't shocked to see Luciana off her line. You mentioned that the chip was from about 40 yards out. Luciana was like 30 yards off her line. She seems to have a little Onana to her game where she'll just do some questionable shit for 4 or 5 times over the course of a match. But I guess at the end of the day, it makes it more entertaining to watch. But, big moments, she does kind of step up. But she makes it more exciting than I think maybe it needs to be. But I don't know. Maybe that's just some of that Brazilian flair. I mean, we're all out here trying to up these ratings, right? So mix it up, Luciana.
There you go. And as an appreciator of Brazilian goalkeepers, Ederson would be A1 right now in my book.
There you go.
Sometimes he's out there in no person's land, and it's just like, what are you doing, buddy? You're scaring the shit out of me a little bit. Luciana definitely comes from that same school. So speaking of excellent first touches, though, Yasmin got on the score sheet after that from the left back position. A rebound falls to her, and she gets on some Roberto Carlos type shit and hits a low, powerful shot into the corner in the 36th minute.
Banger.
We're looking at 2-0, and this was pretty much from 36 minutes to the end of the first half. In hindsight, when I was kind of thinking about the match after I watched it, that was really a preview of what was to come for the rest of the match.
Yeah, I agree with that. Another incredible strike from Yasmin. At this point, it kind of feels like it might be 10 minutes till party time for Brazil and their fans. I think we saw Argentina's best that first 15-ish minutes. Once the second one gets past, and with so much emphasis on it, like that kind of felt like they broke them a little bit.
For sure. And going back to Beatriz Zanerato, I see your name referenced as Beatriz. So I'm going to rock with that for now. Please, anybody, sound off in the comments if I'm off base with that. But speaking of Beatriz, the assist in the first half was not enough for her. So she ended up notching 2 goals in the second half.
Let's go.
With a Gabby Nunez goal sandwiched in between. A nice header from Gabby Nunez to score it. Kind of a walk at that point. I mean, 5-1, that's what you're getting in the second half. I do want to shout out a couple players for Argentina. So credit to Camila Gomez Arez, who saw an opportunity in the 81st minute and hit a lovely cross-pitch pass over to Celeste dos Santos. That led to Dos Santos running 1v1 with Luciana. I thought Dos Santos had great poise. She hit the chip over Luciana to pull that one back. It was obviously much too little, much too late, but I thought that was a nice piece of skill from Dos Santos.
Oh, yeah.
And I just kind of walked away from the match impressed with Brazil, but not like overly impressed. I mean, if we're going to do like the transitive property here, like, USA beat Argentina 4-0. Brazil beats them by a 4-goal margin. I think if I put on my U.S. women's national team fan hat here for a second, I don't think I'm that scared of Brazil. Like, obviously they have good players. Of course they could challenge USA. I don't think there's really that much to be afraid of. Am I now getting overconfident here?
I'm glad you brought this up. Did you notice in the U.S. match? Sorry to go back to the U.S., but did you notice in the U.S. match where the commentators are like, speaking of the tournament, they're like, winning this. I'm paraphrasing. Winning this tournament, it's not the World Cup, but it's not the Olympics, but it is a trophy. And I'm like, whoa, like let's chill. We're ahead of Colombia, and it's the quarterfinals. There's still so much football to be played, and they're already like sort of saying, yeah, well, we got this trophy. It's not a World Cup, but it's a trophy. I didn't like that at all. Bad juju. Yeah. So we definitely want to stay responsible, keep an open mind with regard to what can come. But I actually agree with you. I wasn't super duper blown away by Brazil.
Yeah.
We'll talk about the semifinals matchups here in a second. But I actually think that the U.S. is the one team that Brazil doesn't want to see because they won't have that opportunity to kind of dance around, have space, have some fun, make weird, funky runs, and just kind of catch us sleeping. I think the U.S. is the worst matchup for Brazil. I actually thought that play that you mentioned from 20-year-old Celeste Dos Santos, I thought that was pretty telling. So Brazil's up 4-0, 10-ish minutes left in the match, 10-ish minutes from keeping a clean sheet. Hurts to say, but the Orlando Pride's Adriana falls completely asleep on that play. With Argentina in possession, Dos Santos is out way wide, completely alone. She's like the only one on the left side of the field, and she's like 10 yards onside. She wasn't like right at the cusp. She was like onside by a mile. And after an Argentina throw-in finds its way to Camila Ares, who you also mentioned, pretty routine pass just into acres of space. 2 touches from Dos Santos before her little chippy over the top ruins the shutout. To Brazil's credit, though, Bia Zanerato blows a hole through the side netting for Brazil's 5th goal. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th for a little retribution. But if I'm a Brazil fan, I think I'm marking down that lapse of judgment combined with maybe Luciana's early mistake that could have easily put Argentina ahead. And then at that point, who knows where the match goes. You see a lot of 5-1s that are just no doubters. This one was an A-. I'm not going to quite call it a B+. If I'm a fan of Brazil, I think I'd want to see them locked in a little bit more. I understand this is a rivalry, but game was actually pretty clean. It wasn't, as chippy as USA Colombia. But either way, that team waiting for Brazil in the semis, most definitely not a side to be taken lightly. I think we can expect a little bit of physicality when Brazil takes on their next opponent, who we'll talk about here in just a second. Let's scoot ahead. I want to talk now about, I don't know, maybe one of the teams of the tournament. I'd be curious to hear where you land on this. Mexico taking on Paraguay in a match that was, I know we don't usually say this on the side of the pond, a certified cracker.
It certainly was. And I think I'd agree with you, Mexico being maybe the team of the tournament.
Mm-hmm.
This was a hell of a football game. Looking back in my notes, I wrote, quote, Mexico looks good in possession and in the press, end quote, in the early stages of the game. And the first 30 minutes largely belonged to Mexico. Latchery had a pretty clear game plan, used the skill of Club America right back Karen Luna to drive the ball down the right side of the pitch. And who was there linking up with Luna on the right side? None other than last week's breakout star, Club Tijuana's Mayra Palacio.
Let's go.
Those two also worked with Pachuca midfielder Carla Nieto, who we talked a little bit about last week. Those three were holding possession. They were creating opportunities on goal. And Mexico cashed in the 31st minute when Palacio played a cross into the box. And, of course, who was there? The other breakout star of last week, Lisbeth Ovalle. She got it under control with what felt like 2 quick touches, and she fired a shot to beat Paraguayan keeper Alicia Bobadilla pretty handily. I have a feeling we're going to talk a lot about Bobadilla more throughout this podcast, but it turned out that beating her would be tough. And Ovalle made it look pretty easy there. I have a bone to pick with this part of football stats, but looking at the CONCACAF website, and maybe I was looking too early. I checked again today. I didn't see it, but it doesn't give Paleo an assist on that. I guess presumably because Ovalle took a couple touches before scoring, and I just think that's silly. So break out the ITC personal record book, Bubba. Paleo gets an assist on that one.
Got it right here. Let's go into the book.
Excellent. Thank you for that.
100% co-sign that. And shout out to Trinidadian color commentator Ryan Davis, whose voice I thoroughly enjoyed on the broadcast. Trinidadian, but he's also white, so that one threw me for a loop. So go figure. But with regards to that Pelayo Ovalle link up, whenever you make the announcer say, and the delivery was spectacular, as good as the finish, that sounds like an ITC personal record book assist if I ever saw one. I wanted to have a little quick conversation about Ovalle. We've seen this before in tournaments where there's like a breakout star. You know, I'm obviously thinking Linda Caicedo, James Rodriguez in a World Cup in recent past. Bariuelo in this most recent World Cup was unbelievable. I want to say that Lisbeth Ovalle is on that same trajectory because she just does it all at her position. She's tough, she's physical, she can pass, she can shoot, she can create space. And it just feels like, I'm like, can we get her on the club side? I'm like, can we get her in Orlando? Can I get her Arsenal? Like, let's get her into the Champions League in some way, shape, or form. I think her game absolutely fits. I think she'd be fucking awesome. I don't even know where she plays, actually. So
she plays for Tigres.
Okay.
In Liga MX Femenil. Is it Liga MX or Liga MX?
I mean, I think after last week's performance, I mean, if I'm you,
Heat check.
I'm throwing down that MX.
All right, fair enough. So yeah, she plays for Tigres in Liga MX, and she's 24 years old.
Let's go.
To answer your question, Ovalle a star? Fuck yeah, absolutely, no doubt. She is the star of the tournament, as you mentioned, possibly the team of the tournament. I mean, you nailed it, man. She does everything. She creates space. Yeah. She's strong. She's like broad-shouldered, like she's throwing players around out there, and then has this blinding skill on top of it. She gets the ball on her left foot. She's firing from anywhere around the 18. I love her game. I love her as a player. I saw a lot, like people, and into the channel on the Twitter account, we're trying to follow like as many other people who are smart and really care about the women's game as we can. And a lot of people are saying motherfuckers are sleeping on Liga MX and that it's a great league. So I got to try to find the TV rights. I got to try to find out what's going on down there. We had actually a couple of people in our YouTube comments as well. So shout out to them for like letting us know like, hey, this is a good league down here. So we got to figure out how to watch this, add it to the list of football that we need to at least try to consume.
I'm 100% with it. I mean, I think the talent and the style too, like you can kind of see that if a lot of this Mexican team, which I don't have the exact numbers, but I know a lot of them do play in MX, you can tell that it's a unique style that blends, some NWSL stuff, some like physical stuff, but also super skilled. We talked about the USA-Mexico match. They were exhibiting more skill than the U.S. women's national team was.
Yeah.
Passes were crisper. The movements were better. Somebody also mentioned this with regard to Barcelona in the YouTube comments, saying that, they're running the same plays that they do, on their club teams. And that's kind of why they look so good. I think we're seeing a little bit of that too from this Mexico side.
Okay. I believe I have this right. Anybody can feel free to fact check me in. If it's wrong, we'll take it out of the YouTube video. But Mexico head coach Pedro Lopez, native of Spain, he's 44 years old. And I believe his last head managerial job was coaching the Spanish U20s. And I think when they either won the U20, I believe they won the U20 World Cup, and Beriuelo was on that squad. So the fact that Mexico is out, like looking for talent out there, probably a good sign.
Yeah, 100%. No, they're definitely, can't even really say they're on the way up. It seems like they're already here. They feel like a team that we can see in the quarterfinals, maybe sneak into the semifinal of an upcoming World Cup here if they continue on this trajectory.
Yeah, I don't know. FIFA, you got them ranked 35. Maybe that's too low. I don't know.
I would say so.
So near the end of the first half, it looked like Paraguay's only chance was going to be counterattacking underdog football.
Mhm.
In the first half, they couldn't muster much of an attack on their own, and they could really just not even hold the ball for any real meaningful stretches. It looked like things were going to get pretty ugly in the 43rd minute when 26-year-old Monterrey midfielder Rebecca Bernal, who I thought was fantastic throughout most of this match, Bernal won a header near the penalty spot, played it right onto Kiana Palacios, also of Club America. And Palacios just missed the sitter, hits it over the bar, and we go into the half, Mexico up just 1-0. And from there, I was like, oh boy, if Mexico's going to have open chances like that, this one might get really, really ugly. We come out of the halftime break. Mexico almost immediately makes it 2-0. In the 49th minute, Luna is just stalking at the top of the box on a corner kick. When the deflection comes to her, she just did everything she needed to do, perfectly executed, drills the shot.
Oh, yeah.
2-0. Things are looking up for Mexico.
Incredible strike by Luna. This play featured, I'm going to say, my number one favorite thing in all of football. I know I have a bunch of number one favorite things. A looping header, a ball into the channel, Basha ball. But this one's my real number one favorite. A ball so well struck, the goalkeeper remains completely and utterly frozen. This one took a little deflection, but it was shot out of a cannon. And Bobadilla, who you mentioned, zero chance to stop it. There's something so satisfying. I don't know. It just delights me to no end.
It's incredible because you know that the keeper is like, I'm going to dive to the right. And then like they plant their feet and then it's obviously going left. And they're like, well, that's pointless. I'm not wasting the dive. So at that point, I'm like, okay, this one might actually get out of hand. But man, I was going to save it for later. I'm going to spoil it a little bit. Give me some Paraguay stock. I'm buying some stock in this as a footballing country in the women's game. They turned it into an excellent match. They grew into the game in a way that I thought Colombia would. You could tell that Paraguay was just like, we're not going out sad tonight. Let's just go as hard as we can, and we're going to see what happens. And they had a lot to do to even get to that joy. So they win a penalty, but Barreras, Mexico's keeper, saves it. And it wasn't even like, oh, Barreras made a great, great save. It wasn't even a well-struck penalty. So we're just adding on reasons why Paraguay should be like concerned and kind of like, okay, this one isn't our night. Like, okay, now it's not a well-struck penalty. Barreras saves it kind of easily. Then Paraguay comes off a corner kick and they have two shots on goal from like the 6-yard box. They're both blocked off the line. One was by Tigres left back, Greta Espinoza. The other was by Bernal, which is a diving header off the line, which was super fucking sick.
Yeah, tremendous. I mean, that was big money play. And that's just what you love to see from this Mexico side, that they're just all in. Like they're just all fucking in 90 plus minutes. And we'll get into what transpired in the rest of this game, but kind of now feels like they can win any kind of match. I think this tournament's paid pretty good dividends. Speaking of buying stock, you got a couple of shares of El Salvador somewhere back in the back of the portfolio, a little Paraguay now, just a little sprinkled in. I'm just really happy with kind of how this one's rolled out.
Absolutely. So Bernal clears the ball off the line with that diving header. Now we have the evidence is mounting for Paraguay. This isn't your night. And like, how many times have you seen a side, they start to kind of hang their head? And when they have those chances, then you see the more powerful team, maybe the slightly more talented team, they'll come down and score on a counter and then put the last nail in the coffin and just finish the thing out. And I will say, like, I very, very rarely believe in any pro athlete, quote unquote, giving up. I fucking hate when sports pundits talk about stuff like that, especially guys who, like me, who did not play at any real level and just throw around like, oh yeah, they gave up out there. Like, that's not, if you've ever talked to any of these people who excel in professional sports or even high level collegiate sports, they're not wired that way. They do not fucking give up. But you can see a team kind of recognize like, okay, it's not super happening for us. We're trying, we're doing our thing, but they can have that like momentary lapse in judgment. Not this Paraguay team. They found their joy when 22-year-old Camila Barbosa, she hits a perfect header off a corner kick to beat the keeper. This was another one of those plays that I'm just completely in love with the execution. So Barbosa hits the header into the ground on goal. in traffic. It was exactly what the moment called for.
Yeah.
Because Barreras has no shot at tracking that when the ball is hit low off the header like that. You could tell by the way she dove. By the time she recognized where it was way too late. And now we have 2-1. Paraguay is back in this thing.
I mean, I think you nailed it. Where a lot of teams, they're not really giving up, right? Sometimes what can happen, maybe the intensity goes down a couple notches, maybe the focus goes down a couple notches, a missed play, a missed opportunity gets stuck in your mind a little bit. You're kind of replaying it. You're trying to figure out, all right, what went wrong, and now somebody's running behind you, right? We see that kind of all the time. So it's not a matter of like effort. It's just a matter of like the engine's running a couple fewer RPMs, and I think that's when you get beat by something that, maybe normally you'd be able to defend. But this Paraguay side, not only did they not pack it in, I think they cranked it up.
They did.
To kind of get a penalty kick stopped. They came right back and had those couple chances. The intensity just kind of went up from there. And then you got to credit Mexico as well. They matched it. And then it was just a game of just, leapfrogging each other. It was like, all right, who could give the most? Who can kind of play the hardest? The 50-50 balls were pay-per-view. That game was just fireworks the last 25, 30 minutes.
And speaking of those fireworks, so now Paraguay, they pull one back. So they're down 2-1. So what does Mexico do? They answer quickly. And a little bit of a miscommunication and mistake on Paraguay's side. So 23-year-old Portland Thorns fullback, Reina Reyes for Paraguay, she plays a ball back way too casually to her teammate Veronica Riveros, allowing Mexico's Stephanie Mayor to take the ball with momentum off of Riveros and glide to about as pure of a 1v1 versus a keeper as you could have. Like, there was nobody in the screen other than 1v1 for like a second and a half. But man, Bobadilla, she rushes off her line. She knows exactly about like where to stand, kind of like in front of the penalty spot to put the pressure on Mayor. And in just a phenomenal demonstration of flexibility, poise, and technique. And she's able to kick it out off to the kind of right-hand side of the box as the attackers are running in. But guess who's there? Probably the last person in this tournament you would want to be right there. And it's Ovalle. She's right there with the rebound. And we talked about her calmness and her poise in the USA match. Just super calm, casual, slot the ball into the net from an acute angle, by the way. Yeah. It's not the best of angles for her to get it in there. Mexico's back up 3-1. Surely that was the backbreaker.
Spinal.
No fucking way. Never count Paraguay out. You're out of your fucking mind if you're counting Paraguay out. Riveros not rattled at all by the giveaway. 3 minutes later, Riveros plays a perfectly timed pass over the defense into Rebecca Fernandez, who does the rest to claw Paraguay back to 3-2. That's it.
Insane.
I'm trying to, at this point, I'm just like trying to decide how much stock I am buying in Paraguay at this point. I'm looking at like, okay, how much liquid do I have? What are my other assets doing? How could you just not love this team at this point?
Impossible not to. Tremendous spirit in this one and skill.
Yeah.
Like they made plays when they needed it. And that's like knockout stage football. Team a little bit at a disadvantage, kind of giving it their all. A game that, I don't know, man, like 8 out of 10, 9 times out of 10, 2-0 under those circumstances, missed the penalty kick. It's a wrap. But this one, not that. So you'd love to see that spirit from that side. And we'll definitely be keeping an eye on that Paraguay side.
For sure. And, credit to Mexico, though. They were able to really kind of put some clamps down, especially in the final third. Over the last 18 plus minutes of the match. To your point, you would be silly not to love Paraguay's grit in this match. And the same goes for Mexico. Even though Mexico were front runners throughout this match, they needed that grit too, because how many times have you also seen it go the other way where you're up 2-0? I think Men in Blazers, they have that joke, 2-0 is the most dangerous lead in football. And people remember those games that you give away the 2-0 lead. So for them to keep answering punch, counterpunch was just, that's like why we're watching these games. So I think it's a good sign. It's healthy. I mean, it just speaks to the general overall health of CONCACAF on the Mexico side, for CONMEBOL on the Paraguayan side. I just think there's no way you could leave that match not feeling great about the future of both of these clubs. And you still get to see Mexico play some more.
Yeah, 100%. Let's talk about that some more that we're going to see here coming up on Wednesday. Semifinals, I always say it, styles make fights. Brazil, offensive-minded, creative, explosive. Mexico, tough, aggressive, different kind of explosive. No shots at the US or Canada, who face off in the other semifinals matchup. But this Brazil-Mexico matchup, holy hell. Talk about two teams that are both on absolute fire coming into this one. Impossible to predict who comes out on top. One thing I can predict, though, I am not to be disturbed Wednesday night, 7 p.m. Eastern, while these two teams lock up, because I need to be 100% fucking locked into this one. Quick question here. Obviously, these two teams looking really strong coming to the semifinals matchup. Mexico coming off a huge win over the U.S., another nip and tuck, but very professional win over a really tough Paraguay opponent. Brazil, they took care of business in the group stage, took care of business again in the quarters, but still maybe something a little bit missing. You know, we talked about this too in our Champions League coverage, when a tough road can kind of sharpen you a little bit, kind of get you ready. Brazil hasn't, they had a tough one against Colombia. Argentina didn't put up much of a fight. We've watched these two teams pretty closely in these quarterfinals matchup. Who would you say is in better form coming into the semis here?
It might sound weird. I know Brazil hasn't lost. I know Mexico drew their opening match against Argentina. I know Brazil's walking in off a 5-1 defeat of Argentina. I think it's Mexico, man. I think they're fucking really, really good. God,
I agree with you.
Ovalle, Paleo, and Nieto. I just love that link up right there. I think that is a really nice front line who plays well with the other players in the mix there. Man, like they look strong. They play strong. They play confident. Ovalle looks like she's going to start shooting from fucking 40 yards out. She doesn't care. She right now is looking around saying, I'm the best player in this tournament. I got 5 goals in this tournament. Who wants to see me? I knocked off the big bad USA. What's up? And so I think if you're her, you walk into that match and you tell all your supporting cast or your teammates, let's go fucking beat Brazil in an important football match.
I'm glad you helped me reconcile what I was feeling, because obviously you see Brazil, you see the results, you see all the talent, but there's just something about this Mexico side. You're just like, that's the side right here. Like, kind of feels like Ovalle might be the player of the tournament, Mexico might be the team of the tournament, and we might just see that carry all the way into the final. They definitely could be one of the teams holding the trophy at the end of it. I'm just super pumped for this matchup. I think it would be a travesty to call this one an undercard. This kind of feels like a co-main event,
Yeah.
But I don't know. I'm just pumped. Glad we get to see it first. Then we have the U.S.-Canada matchup immediately thereafter. I'm ready for Wednesday, man.
I'm just going to put this out into the universe. I know we live in the United States of America. We talk about the U.S. women's national team a lot. This could be a better game. I think it's very live that this is a better, more entertaining, more skilled match. But I say that saying that it is on the board. I'm not guaranteeing it, because looking up and down those Canada and USA rosters, those are some pretty incredible rosters. But I think that Mexico-Brazil has the opportunity to be like a 4-3 classic or maybe a 2-1 classic. Like, I just think it is very live that I think it's more likely that you get an exciting game than a boring game.
I agree with that. If I were a betting man, I'd bet on this one being the more exciting of the two. But we just got to get to Wednesday. All right, let's scoot ahead. Canada, Costa Rica. We're in March, also known as college basketball season here in the U.S. In this 1 versus 8 matchup, where the one usually walks into the next round, where was your head at as these two teams hit the pitch?
I feel like every time I watch Canada, and I found myself saying this before this match, I'm like, man, I really like the way Canada's lining up. As I joke about on this podcast, I put on my Pep Guardiola hat, and I'm like, yeah, that's the right formation. What do I know? But I realized looking at it this time, I was like, ooh, yeah, good formation. I really like that. And then I just realized, I was like, I just like this lineup. I like this formation because all the players are really fucking good on this
good
team.
ass players.
Yeah, good choice there, manager. Way to go. Good thinking putting Ashley Lawrence in the side. I would have done that too. To talk about it, I mean, Canada has, I'm going to just get my other biases out of the way real quick. Canada has 2 Seattle Reign players, including probably my favorite Reign player, defensive midfielder Quinn. They also have 22-year-old striker Jordan Huitema. Both of them obviously played on a team that went to the NWSL final. In goal, Canada has Kaylin Sheridan, who helped lead the San Diego Wave to the NWSL Shield. Now, if you want to add to that NWSL winning experience, here's some players they have who have appeared in the Champions League. You have Jessie Fleming, who is now of the Portland Thorns, but she played at Chelsea and appeared in Champions League matches this year before her transfer over to Portland. Sticking with Chelsea, you have the obvious Chelsea starters, Kadisha Buchanan at left back, and the aforementioned Ashley Lawrence, who tends to play right back when she's playing over in London, but can move anywhere on this Canadian team. And let me just be clear, could also do it in the WSL. I don't think I have any doubts about that. Yep. She's primarily a right back there, but she'll play midfield. She'll play forward for Canada. After that, you have Vanessa Gilles, who plays over at Lyon. You have Evelyn Viens from Into the Channel pod favorite AS Roma. And then, of course, you have Clarissa Larissi from our pals over in Sweden at BK Häcken.
Let's go.
And I'm not even done. Outside of the Champions League, they still have Chloe Lacasse from Your Lady Gunners. They have Adriana Leon from Aston Villa and Julia Grosso at a little club called Juventus. So we're talking about major clubs playing in major competitions, in major competitive markets. And so you shake all that up in the roster salad mixer, and you have yourself a wonderful mix of players who come from and have been absorbing these different footballing identities from around the world. And I think about that. I know we talk about teams and the merits of having that built-in chemistry. A lot of the Spanish national team plays for Barcelona. A lot of the Portuguese national team plays for Benfica. But I think, in my opinion, I really love when a national team comes together and they have these mixes from these other elite clubs kind of spread out around the world, not all in the same league. And then they form a chemistry of those different identities of like, well, I do this really well, and it actually meshes with this other thing that you do. Creating a system using the collective strengths and the diverse strengths of their players to form your own national footballing identity. So that's some real heavy nerd shit, but that's what I think is like one of my favorite parts of the national game.
I think in theory, I'm going to be a little tough on you. I think it's a beautiful thought.
Sure.
We didn't quite see that fully come into bloom in this one. This one was a bit of a slog.
Well, in this match, yeah, sure.
Yeah. I mean, I think, and obviously, Canada advances, so we'll see. Soccer pundits, not unlike you or I, Mr. Grand Angle, often celebrate the beauty of a 0-0 match. You'll hear them say, oh, there's just something about it. Buddy, let me tell you, this one wasn't that. Canada, with all their global influence, they dominated from end to end in this one. 62% possession. They outshot Las Ticas 20-2. More shots on target as well. 7-1. 10 corners for Canada, just 1 for Costa Rica. Costa Rica did a really good job defending Canada in this one. Canada coming in, they had hung 13 goals on their group stage opponents. So keeping Canada off the score sheet for 103 minutes, no small task. Costa Rica keeper Daniela Solera was awesome in this match. I think her confident goalkeeping gave her back line and the team as a whole just real confidence that they could maybe take this one into PKs. For Canada, though, Jessie Fleming, who you mentioned, incredible in this match. I mean, she was the connector of connectors. Also wanted to call out the Washington Spirit's Gabby Carl, also really effective. She just covered so much ground. I have to imagine she logged the most mileage because she was just running.
Yeah.
Every other second that I looked up, she was just running free somewhere. 93rd minute, though, even with Canada kind of dominating this one, this was probably the best chance of the entire match from either side. Costa Rica's Gabriela Guillen finds herself in a huge pocket of space, a yard outside the 6, essentially 1v1 with Canada goalkeeper Kaylin Sheridan, and Sheridan makes just a sensational save. Another thing we like to say, that's, football pundits, is a great defensive play is as good as a goal. That's like, one of the old cliches. This great defensive play, though, knockout stage, 93rd minute, 0-0, and you make that kind of save to stay alive in the tournament, that's better than a goal. That's like a tournament saver. Canada's front three in this one of Leon, Lacasse, and Haitema couldn't quite crack the seal in normal time. I thought Leicester City's Deanne Rose, who came in at halftime, she injected some energy into the squad, but after 90 plus minutes, we're still stuck on 0-0.
Yeah, I mean, you're right about this particular game. Every game is not going to be a beautiful mix of skill and frenetic pace. You're going to have your occasional tough game to watch. But I think there is legitimacy to the idea that teams who are able to win these types of games tend to do well in tournaments because along a stretch, and now the World Cup is obviously a significantly longer tournament than this, and the Olympics is a very condensed tournament. But like if you're thinking about like long-term tournament football, you're almost destined to have a game like this.
That's fair.
The attack did not look great for stretches, but to be able to kind of stay with it and keep your composure, I think that counts for something. And you raise a good point about the Sheridan save. At the least, just from an entertainment perspective, if you're not going to score a lot of goals, if it's not going to be up and down, at least give me a couple moments of brilliance from the goalkeepers. Sprinkle in some acrobatic saves just to hold my interest. And, we're talking about this. This is a 2-beer podcast just for the audience because that's how good the football was.
I'm glad you circled back to the Sheridan save because 93 minutes into the match, this is the only shot on target she faced. So to fucking have like an attacker staring you down, like literally like you could almost reach out and touch her. She's so close. And to be able to save a shot that's from that point blank range in that high leverage situation, that I think is what a team like this can take away from a match where they didn't play their best. They controlled the shit out of the ball. Fleming was great. They created a bunch of chances. I mean, it just almost got comical like at the end of it. As I mentioned before, this one, bit of a rock fight. I'm going to be honest. I wasn't doing backflips when I found out they were going to get another 30 minutes of this one. I thought the outcome seemed pretty inevitable, despite the Guillen chance. I was like, okay, once they save that, we already know what's on the menu here. 104th minute on Canada's 18th shot of the match. Roma atacante Evelyn Vienne puts the Canadians ahead 1-0. Well-executed header on a ball in from Canada's MVP in this one, Jessie Fleming. I thought the announcer said it best when she says, yes, finally, Canada scores. And I really couldn't have said it better myself. Not sure what to think about this Canada side, though. What says more? Their dominance offensively and defensively, and their shot production, or their lack of finishing in a knockout situation. Maybe it was nerves. Maybe they're a little gassed. Who knows? After all, they needed like an absolute worldly of a save just to get to extra time because they were like really right there on the edge. And that's what can happen when you have an off day. But looking ahead to USA Canada in the semis, what are you going to be looking for when these teams clash on Wednesday?
I would like to see Evelyn Viennes just start hit you with one of these, Bellissima, I don't know if that's cultural appropriation or not. Maybe she shouldn't do that. But as far as this upcoming match goes, I think Canada's a team that's capable of winning. Sure. I think the days that we've talked about with USA, the days are gone where it's like it would take a miracle to beat USA. That's been over for a little while now, longer than some people may care to think. Especially with Canada, though, who I think has played USA tough in the past. I do think that if Canada is going to have difficulty scoring against the USA, and I think they might have difficulty scoring, then they're going to try to turn this into even more of a rock fight than the match versus Costa Rica. I think it's worth mentioning that Canada has yet to concede a goal in this tournament. Their goal differential is a staggering plus 14 in the 4 matches that they've played.
Come on.
Now, it started with a 6-0 victory over El Salvador, a 4-0 victory over the previously discussed Paraguay, and then back-to-back victories over Costa Rica, one 3-0, one 1-0. I am very excited to see the battle of Jaden Shaw, Trinity Rodman, and Lindsay Horan versus Quinn, Gilles, and Buchanan in defense. I think that ought to be some physical, smart play happening in the USA's final third, in the attacking third there. As for USA's defense, I'm not going to hate to watch the back 4 of Neiswanger, Davidson, Gurma, and Fox again. I would hope that that's who the USA plans to kind of put up against Leon, possibly Larissi, and Ashley Lawrence. So I think we could be in. You mentioned it at the top of our full episode here. Could be in for a certified cracker. I don't know if it's going to be necessarily as great as Mexico-Brazil, but we certainly have a chance at it.
This one's going to be interesting because I think one of the downsides of having players from all the different leagues, the place where you saw the chemistry The weakest, I think, was in Canada's attack.
Mm.
Leon looked a little off. I think she kind of was traveling maybe too far out of her zone, trying to create a little bit.
Yep.
I think Fleming was really the key piece for them, just because where she was placed on the field, she could just kind of see, Haitama and where everybody was at, and was like, okay, I can distribute here. It ends up being her that puts the ball in that VN scores on. So that was pretty fitting. I think that's where the U.S. is going to have an advantage. I think Canada's going to have a hard time breaking all the way through.
Yep.
The other issue is we saw what Mexico was able to do against a limited U.S. roster. Now I got to imagine we're going to have all the big guns come out for this one. But I think, to your point, Canada hasn't conceded, and those defenders, I think all three, not just professional defenders, but high level defenders, they can really kind of make it difficult. This is going to be quite a different feel than the Colombia match. I think when you think athletically, physically, I think they're going to be at the level. Some of those players, I think, even might have an advantage. Some of those Canada players might even have an advantage athletically. Depends on who we have out there. This one's going to be a banger as well. I think, to your point about the Brazil Mexico, I can see this one all different types of score lines as well. I think it'll be ultimately low scoring, maybe like a 1-0, 2-0, 2-1 kind of affair.
Yep.
And I would just love to see the US get a little crafty, well-worked actions, that are a little bit less predictable than what we've seen. I think that's how they were able to get past Colombia. And that might just be the recipe for getting past this Canada side.
Give me one sports take chip, and I'm going to set it on the roulette wheel for USA wins 2-1. But you got to play 120 minutes of football to get there.
Ooh, I like that. Trying to think who gets it in extra time. Feels like maybe like a Sophia Smith.
That's
a little bit a retribution.
We're mind melding.
There we go. I can see it. Mm-hmm. Comes on in the 70th. Maybe makes an error and kind of redeems herself with a big goal at the end. That would be something. Either way, that one's going down Wednesday, 10:15 p.m. Eastern. Anything else you want to hit before we get out of here?
I think we covered it, man.
Awesome. All right, man. I think we did it. This has been another episode of Into the Channel. Remember, subscribe or follow Into the Channel, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you like to watch or listen, at ITC_pod on X, at Into the Channel pod on Threads. Big thanks to you for watching, listening, no matter your club or your country, Into the Channel community. Just a place where we can all hang out, fire off some takes, share some clips, celebrate the sport we love, call out some of the evil entities that might be pulling the strings or trying to pull the strings on the game that we love. Either way, thrilled to have each and every one of you hanging out with us. And a big thank you to my co-host for avoiding a knockout during this knockout stage.
Absolutely. No matter where you are, just remember, enjoy the football responsibly. And even if you're a baby drinking a truly hard seltzer at a football match, drink responsibly as well. We'll see you guys later.